The More You Know is a media and tech literacy series produced by Independent Thinker. It aims to help the public become more knowledgeable about our digital world. In this episode, we cover taking control of your digital privacy, a full month of privacy tips.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you join us today.
Absolutely. It is great to be here.
If you are listening to this right now, you are probably already well aware that the digital landscape has become incredibly complex to navigate.
Overwhelming.
Right. Every single day brings a new privacy policy update or another major corporate data breach or, a new debate over app permissions. Keeping track of the threat landscape can honestly feel like a full-time job.
It really can.
So we have custom-tailored this deep dive just for you. Our mission today is to decode the hidden world of digital privacy. We want to examine how seemingly minor digital vulnerabilities, the kind of invisible data leaks you might not even realize are happening on your phone right now, can have massive, highly tangible impacts in your physical, real-world life.
And we have a uniquely stacked set of sources to guide this exploration today. It is a really fascinating combination of high-level digital rights advocacy and grassroots public awareness.
It is such an interesting pairing. We are looking at a very specific digital rights and privacy awareness video strategy. This was developed by a creative agency called Independent Thinker, LLC.
Right.
And this campaign is specifically aimed at empowering the Hispanic and Latino community. It's rolling out in preparation for Data Privacy Day, which falls on January 28th, 2026.
Which is a crucial demographic to reach.
Yeah.
And the strategy itself is just brilliantly constructed. But to fully understand the foundation of that upcoming video campaign, we're also diving deep into its primary source material.
Yeah, the underlying data.
Exactly. That is the audio companion to the Electronic Frontier Foundation's 831st Effector newsletter, which was published back in October 2025.
The EFF has been at the forefront of the digital rights battle for decades. They are really the heavyweights in this space. And when you look at how the Independent Thinker agencies synthesize the EFF's dense policy work for a broader audience, one clear overarching theme just jumps right off the page.
Mm-hmm.
That theme is when you lose your rights online, you lose them in real life.
That single sentence carries profound weight. Our entire discussion today will revolve around why that statement is so urgently true. I mean, digital rights are frequently treated as these abstract concepts.
Like data points just floating around somewhere.
Exactly, floating in a server farm. But the reality is that the boundary between our digital presence and our physical safety has completely dissolved.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the EFF's October newsletter intentionally leaned into a spooky theme, they are phrasing these specific cybersecurity threats as literal, real-life horror stories. Let's start with the first major issue they highlighted, which deals with physical tracking devices.
The tracking paradox. This is one of the most difficult engineering and policy challenges in consumer tech right now.
The newsletter specifically looks at researchers who analyzed tile tracking devices.
Yeah.
You know, the popular Bluetooth trackers owned by Life360?
Right, the ones you put on your keys.
Yeah. The researchers discovered that these devices were broadcasting unencrypted unique identifiers. Essentially, they were just shouting their permanent identity into the digital void.
Allowing anyone with the right receiver to map their movements over time.
Exactly. And when Wired magazine confronted Life360 about this vulnerability, the corporate response was simply that they had made unspecified improvements to build user trust.
Unspecified improvements is the ultimate corporate non-answer. What's fascinating here is the inherent, almost unsolvable paradox of this technology.
How so?
Well, consumers want these devices to be incredibly cheap, right? They want them to run on a battery for a year and to constantly ping their location via ubiquitous networks so we can find a stolen bicycle or misplaced luggage.
Right, we want the convenience.
But the EFF sources point out a fundamental limitation in the physics of the network. It is technically impossible to build an anti-theft tracking device that reliably alerts the owner without that exact same technology doubling as a highly effective, terrifying stalking tool.
Because the mechanism is identical. A Bluetooth beacon has absolutely no contextual awareness. It doesn't know if it has been attached to your own keychain or if someone maliciously slipped it into the lining of a stranger's jacket.
And that is the crux of the engineering nightmare. If you design the device's protocol to be completely untraceable and anonymized to protect the owner's privacy from third parties, it becomes the perfect undetectable tool for a bad actor to track someone else.
Wow.
Conversely, if you force the device to loudly identify itself to nearby smartphones to prevent stalking batching, you are completely compromising the location security of the actual owner. There is no magic algorithm that can parse the moral intent behind why the device is moving.
Which is a perfect segue into the next spooky story because it completely shatters that myth of magic algorithms. The EFF newsletter dives into the ongoing high-stakes battle between the UK government and Apple regarding encryption backdoors.
Yes.
Earlier in the year, Apple actually disabled its advanced encrypted cloud backups for users in the UK because the government was legally demanding a backdoor into their servers.
And we should clarify, a backdoor in this context means a deliberate engineered bypass. It's built directly into the core encryption protocol, allowing a government entity to decrypt and access private user data on demand.
The U.S. technology sector pushed back hard on this. But reportedly, the UK government has recently reissued this demand, trying a totally new tactic. They are now claiming they only want the mandate to apply to UK users, supposedly leaving the rest of the world's encryption intact.
Which is
I mean, how does that even work structurally? Can you actually geofence encryption keys like that?
You cannot.
Yeah.
You really cannot. And that demonstrates a staggering misunderstanding of cryptography at the legislative level. The government's idealized vision is that technology companies can somehow forge a golden key, a secret secure passage that only authorized law enforcement can utilize.
But the math doesn't work that way.
The mathematics of encryption do not allow for conditional access based on holding a badge. A vulnerability in the code is just a vulnerability. If you deliberately weaken the mathematics that protect banking infrastructure or private communications and cloud storage, you have compromised the entire system for everyone.
Because you can't control who finds that vulnerability once it exists.
Precisely the issue. State-sponsored hacking groups, organized cybercrime syndicates, and rogue actors are all searching for that exact same access point. Furthermore, attempting to limit a mathematical vulnerability to UK users ignores the fundamental architecture of the global internet.
Right.
If a citizen in London sends a highly sensitive encrypted business file to a colleague in Tokyo whose jurisdictional math applies, cryptography does not recognize geographical borders. It only recognizes whether a key works or it doesn't.
And what's brilliant about the independent thinker marketing strategy is how they plan to visualize this for the public. Their campaign notes suggest animating this concept as a literal glowing door in a digital fortress.
That's a great visual.
They want to show that once a door is forced open for one person, a flood of shadowy figures rushes in right behind them. It makes the abstract math incredibly concrete. But to move from theory to reality, we need to look at what happens when vast surveillance systems are actually deployed in our physical communities without proper oversight.
The next case study from the EFF provides a stark, unsettling look at exactly that kind of deployment.
It really does. Now, before we get into this next case from the EFF files, I need to pause for a second. This touches on highly sensitive, politically charged territory regarding abortion laws in Texas.
Yes, it's important we frame this correctly.
Exactly. I want to make it perfectly clear to you, the listener, that we are taking absolutely no sides here. We are not endorsing any viewpoints. We are strictly and impartially reporting the facts regarding the technological deployment exactly as they are documented in the EFF source material.
That is vital context. The focus here is strictly on the infrastructure of data collection and how access to that data is governed.
According to the EFS public records request, a Texas sheriff's office utilized a sprawling automated license plate reader system. This is commonly known as an ALPR, and it was operated by a private surveillance company called Flock. When this specific story initially broke, both the sheriff's office and Flock engaged in a public relations campaign. They claimed the system was merely being used to locate a missing person whose family was concerned about her medical well-being.
That was the narrative presented to the media to justify the search.
But the internal documents obtained by the EFF revealed a completely different reality. Those records proved that the ALPR system was actively being used to conduct an abortion investigation. It was officially categorized in their internal paperwork as a death investigation of a fetus.
The revelation of the true intent is concerning, but the sheer technological scope of how that investigation was conducted is what truly illustrates the power of these modern surveillance networks.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The public often assumes a sheriff is just looking at a few cameras at local intersections within their own county limits. But this specific search queried a federated network of 83,000 different Flock cameras deployed nationwide.
83,000 automated cameras. constantly logging the time, location, and direction of travel for millions of civilian vehicles every single day.
The scale is almost impossible to wrap your head around. A person could be driving down a highway 3 states away, assuming they have total privacy in their vehicle, while their exact coordinates are being instantly fed into a searchable, cross-jurisdictional database.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it exposes a terrifying lack of operational transparency in how domestic surveillance is managed. When an official executes a search across a database of 83,000 cameras, the audit logs, which are theoretically the primary safeguard against abuse, are shockingly inadequate.
How inadequate?
In this specific incident, the EFF noted that the mandatory audit log justifying the nationwide search simply contained a single unverified word.
Just one word.
Yes, the word abortion.
There was no warrant attached to the log, no judicial oversight required before hitting search, just one word typed into a box.
We have essentially built a dragnet surveillance infrastructure that relies entirely on the honor system. The EFF explicitly warns about the reality of the insider threat in these scenarios. You are forced to trust that every single individual with login credentials to that system will act flawlessly and ethically for the rest of time.
And human nature guarantees that will fail.
Exactly. And in a rather grim validation of that warning, the ESF sources note that the specific Texas sheriff who initiated this ALPR investigation was later arrested and indicted for completely unrelated crimes.
It completely shatters the illusion that these systems are only operated by infallible actors. And listening to all of this, the tracking paradoxes, the encryption threats, the nationwide dragnet surveillance, it is incredibly easy to feel what the EFS calls privacy nihilism.
Yes, that's a great term for it.
Thorin Klasowski, a security and privacy activist at the EFF, uses this term in the newsletter. It is that suffocating, paralyzing feeling that the corporations already have all our data. The surveillance systems are too deeply entrenched, and any attempt to protect ourselves is just completely futile.
Privacy nihilism is a very pervasive psychological state right now. It's particularly common among tech-literate users who understand just how vast the data collection apparatus really is. But conceding defeat is exactly what data brokers and surveillance companies bank on.
So what does this all mean? How do we push back against that paralysis? Thorin and the EFF launched a campaign called Opt Out October, which serves as a direct antidote to privacy nihilism. The philosophy isn't about going off the grid or tossing your smartphone into a river. It is about taking one small, manageable action every day to throw sand into the gears of the surveillance economy.
It focuses on establishing a hardened baseline of digital hygiene. We don't need to reiterate the basic mechanics of how a password manager or two-factor authentication operates. The audience understands those tools.
Right.
But Thorin emphasizes the strategy of deployment. Given that corporate data breaches are a mathematical certainty, relying on a password manager to deploy unique cryptographic strings for every single login is the only way to compartmentalize a breach.
It stops a localized compromise at a minor e-commerce site from cascading into a catastrophic takeover of your primary email or financial accounts.
Precisely. And implementing 2FA everywhere is about adding friction. You are making yourself a statistically harder target, encouraging automated attacks to simply move on to less secure accounts.
Once you establish that baseline, the EFF strategy moves into tackling surveillance advertising.
Yeah.
The Independent Thinker video campaign heavily focuses on this, visualizing how every tap and swipe leaves behavioral breadcrumbs across the internet. But Thorin outlines how easily we can sweep those breadcrumbs up. On iOS, toggling off the enable allow apps to ask to track setting forces a baseline level of app isolation. On Android, navigating into the privacy settings and completely deleting your advertising ID effectively severs the persistent tracking profile they use to follow you across different services.
And for desktop environments, deploying the EFF's Privacy Badger extension is highly recommended. It doesn't rely on block lists. It heuristically learns to block invisible third-party trackers based on their behavior as you navigate the web.
It operates silently, which is brilliant. But even with those defenses active now, there is still the legacy issue of the data that has already been harvested over the past decade by massive data broker aggregators.
Oh, the data brokers.
Thorin detailed the process of formally requesting your data file from these brokers, which is a legally mandated process in several states, though these companies usually comply globally within 45 days just to streamline their own compliance operations.
Reviewing your own data file from a broker is often a surreal experience. It reveals the vast discrepancy between the volume of data they collect and the accuracy of the conclusions they draw from it.
Thorin's personal data file was simultaneously creepy and hilarious. The brokers had retained an ancient prodigy.net email address from his high school days, which is a staggering level of data retention.
Prodigy.net, that really takes you back.
Right. They had also algorithmically categorized him with bizarrely specific marketing tags, like labeling him a high-fiber food lover. But the absolute highlight of the flawed algorithm was that these data brokers categorized Thorin Klasowski, a professional cybersecurity and privacy activist working for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, as not a big computer guy.
The irony is wonderful, but this raises an important question regarding the asymmetry of the data trait. While a flawed marketing profile about fiber intake is amusing, the core commodity these brokers are harvesting and selling is our precise historical location data.
The exact coordinates of our daily routines.
Location data is deeply sensitive. It reveals your medical specialists, your political affiliations based on the gatherings you attend your workplace and where you sleep. Yet the EFF highlights how readily consumers trade continuous, highly precise GPS access for the most minor digital conveniences.
The primary culprits being food delivery and rideshare applications. We grant an app permanent access to our phone's GPS hardware just so we don't have to spend 3 seconds typing our home address into the delivery field.
We are giving up a permanent record of our physical movements to save 3 seconds of typing. It is a wildly disproportionate exchange. Furthermore, for applications that legitimately require geographic context to function like a local weather app, there is zero technical requirement for them to know your exact coordinates down to the meter.
They just need a general idea.
Exactly. Both major mobile operating systems now allow users to restrict location permissions to an approximate radius. Supplying a zip code or neighborhood-level parameter allows the weather app to function perfectly without feeding your exact daily movements into a data broker's aggregator.
Auditing those app permissions is crucial. But I have to say, the most reassuring part of the entire EFF newsletter was Thorin's confession about his own struggles with app bloat. Even as a privacy guru, he admitted that the friction of modern travel constantly undermines his digital hygiene.
The infrastructure of travel practically mandates the installation of invasive software.
You land at an airport, you have to download an airline app for the boarding pass. You get to the hotel, like a Marriott or a Hilton, and you're forced to download their proprietary app just to connect to the Wi-Fi or unlock your room door.
Yep.
Thorin confessed that in the chaos of traveling, he routinely forgets to delete these apps, and they sit on his device harvesting data until he remembers to do a manual sweep. If the EFF's own security expert occasionally drops the ball and has to clean up his digital footprint, it proves that none of us should feel defeated if our devices need a serious audit.
That is the ultimate takeaway from the EFF's approach. Digital privacy is not a state of absolute impenetrable perfection. It is an ongoing practice of risk reduction.
Which brings us full circle to the brilliance of the Independent Thinker LLC strategy. They are taking all of this dense, heavy material, the cryptography debates, the ALPR networks, the data broker profiles, and translating it into a highly accessible format.
And the format is so specific.
Yes. The campaign utilizes a 1080 by 1920 vertical cell phone video format, perfectly engineered for algorithmic distribution on social media. They employ vibrant, futuristic, vector-based visuals to make these concepts memorable, and they use a casual, highly informative female voiceover with a New York City accent to ground the technical jargon in a relatable, authoritative tone.
It is a masterclass in community outreach for Data Privacy Day. Taking the friction out of the learning process is essential for driving real behavioral change.
Absolutely. And speaking of taking the friction out, I cannot let us wrap up without mentioning the incredible outtake at the very end of the EFF's audio newsletter.
I love this part.
After covering all of these heavy surveillance topics, the host transitioned into reading standard community announcements.
The outreach schedule for upcoming conferences.
Yes, they are listing off a speakeasy meetup in Portland, Oregon, another gathering in New York, and their upcoming presence at the TechCrunch Disrupt Expo in San Francisco. But as the main host is trying to maintain a professional broadcast quality delivery, the background audio is entirely hijacked by the sound of a litter of very loud chirping kittens.
The co-host's cat had just given birth, and they were right next to the microphone during the recording session.
It completely derailed the announcements in the best way possible. The main host finally stops reading and dryly points out that he is actually heavily allergic to cats, so listening to them meow through a remote audio feed was legally the safest way he could interact with them.
It is a phenomenal moment of levity, but it also serves as a poignant reminder of why this work matters. The EFF and campaigns like the one from Independent Thinker aren't fighting for the theoretical sanctity of computer code. They're fighting to protect the real people, the families, and even the pets living their lives on the physical side of the screen.
That is a beautiful way to frame it. Synthesizing the entirety of our sources today, the mandate is clear. Ubiquitous tracking is real, and the data broker economy is vast. But establishing your digital baseline, auditing your permissions, utilizing unique credentials, and denying trackers is not an esoteric hobby for security researchers. It is a fundamental, non-negotiable requirement for preserving your autonomy and your physical safety in the modern era. Your digital footprint is simply an extension of your physical self.
And protecting one requires protecting the other. That brings us to the close of today's deep dive. But before we sign off, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to turn over in your mind. We spent time today dissecting the bizarre world of data brokers, noting how they hoard massive amounts of historical data, and we laughed at how comically flawed their algorithmic profiles can be, like tagging a prominent cybersecurity expert as not a computer guy.
Right.
But consider the trajectory of where technology is heading right now. What happens to our real-world rights when the next generation of unexplainable artificial intelligence systems is granted direct access to those sprawling data broker databases? That is the big question.
What happens when an autonomous AI is tasked with determining your eligibility for a competitive job, your approval for a critical mortgage loan, or even your triage priority for life-saving healthcare, and it bases that irreversible decision on a massive, unregulated, and fundamentally inaccurate profile of who it thinks you are? It is something to seriously consider the next time a random delivery app asks for permanent access to your exact GPS coordinates. Thank you so much for exploring this with us. We'll catch you on the next one.
For more episodes related to media, social media, tech, and privacy, visit our YouTube channel, Independent Thinker LLC.